Back and
How's that? Can we start off with the roll?
Paul Anderson.
Here.
Clara Andriola.
present.
Elise Bonkowski. Here. Charlene Bybee.
Here.
Chris Cobb.
Here.
Andrew Diss. Here. Jeannie Herman. Justin Ivory. Here. Miguel Martinez. Devon Reese. And Dave Solero.
I think I probably did. Sorry. Item 2, items for presentation, discussion, information, and/or action. Public comment.
We have no public comment.
Okay. What's our item 2.01, I guess? Approval of the minutes of February 1st, 2024, and possible
So moved.
action. We got a first by member Andriola,
Second.
second by member Anderson. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Nay. Motion carries. Item 2.02, presentation, discussion, and possible action of recommend approval of the fiscal year 2025-2029 5-year capital improvement plan for the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees for possible action. Mr. Searcy.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be joined in a moment by our Chief Financial Officer, Mark Mathers. But for the record, my name's Adam Searcy. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Run through the 5-year CIP. Always, we begin our presentations with acknowledgement of the WCSD promise and how we are aligned with every student's name, strength, and need, so they will graduate and do so successfully in partnership with our families and our community. This absolutely aligns and is supported by that promise. So some basics about what the capital improvement plan is. You guys are all familiar with this in a lot of different forums and fashions. But I wanted to emphasize that first part, the composition, the process through which we develop this, I think is stronger than ever before. As you'll see later tonight, the majority of the dollars, the investments associated with the CIP stem from the facility modernization plan, which, as you guys know better than most, was developed in tremendous collaboration with the community itself. So these projects really are a reflection of what our community needs and has voiced for a long time. And then, of course, hand in hand, the CIP is about our needs and our resources. So this plan includes all, not just our WC1 resources or sales tax revenues, but all of our capital project revenue resources. So that's really kind of what it is. I like this slide. What it is, it's a plan. It's a 5-year plan, which again forecasts at a relatively high level the projects, the needs, and options for financing and funding the resources for that plan. What it is not is specific authorization of individual projects. And I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight Stonebrook Elementary School. If you guys remember, that was absolutely a part of last year's CIP. We took individual action to approve the design for that project, got all the way down to the 2-yard line, and ultimately would have had to come back for funding allocation and board approval, chose not to. So it's just one example, and we've had examples of changes in the other direction. But tonight, this is a very, the next step in the process and a detailed look of what's ahead, but it is not specific approval of these projects at this time. So good timing. Well, I guess I've got one more slide, pardon me. This is just a little bit more detail about that development process. I mentioned the facility modernization plan. We all were a part of that intensive community-wide process for many, many months, which today makes up the majority of the projects in the CIP. We'll talk later this evening about the asset renewal. So the second largest portion of the CIP is actually replacement of existing infrastructure and making sure what we have is maintained in a critical state of repair, and then other major projects. So we basically develop the needs and then consult on the resources and then iterate, if there is a difference. So you'll find a balance between the needs and the resources as we unveil the next several slides. Hand it over to Mark Mathers.
Thank you. Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer. So as we've talked about in years past, there is a constraint here, a real-world constraint of revenues, just like for you in the government sector, fellow public sector officials. That you do revenue projections, you get a budget, and you have to live within the budget. And same thing basically applies here. There's a little bit more nuance and flexibility in terms of what one might debt finance and thereby accelerate projects versus doing on a pay-as-you-go basis. We, as you all know, we use a mixture of both. So we try to do as much pay-as-you-go financing as we can, i.e. cash funding projects, because then we don't pay interest, right? And we can do that. We've done it for some of our elementary schools, cash fund them, let cash build up and pay them with cash, and other smaller kind of projects. But when we talk about middle schools and high schools and major projects, those are just so large that it would take years and years and years to save up enough money to pay for those. So in those cases, we want to, again, get new modern schools for our students as fast as possible. And so in that case, we use debt financing. Our two primary sources of revenue are the WC1 sales tax, which, as you know, in November of 2016, voters approved a 0.54% increase to the sales tax rate. The growth of those revenues has been incredible. Even with, so we saw 2 straight years of double-digit growth of WC1 revenues. And then this most recent fiscal year, we saw flat, down 0.5% growth, if you will. But that makes sense after 2 double-digit years that you'd get some moderation. We're seeing very mild growth this year. We think eventually we'll get back on track onto a normal trajectory of maybe 5% growth per year. But that's our one of 2 major revenue sources that brings in roughly $63 million per year. The second major revenue source that we have available to us, that's been available to us for a long, long time, is the school district debt rate on your property tax bill. And that's 38.85 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So when you look on your property tax bill, it's right there. You can see it. That has come to the district again for many, many years. There's a 10-year authorization period for that property tax, and it has been renewed each time over that before the end of that 10-year authorization. That's why we call it, so that authorization's rolled over, which is why we call the bonds that pledge those property taxes rollover bonds, if you're curious. And as you can see, in the current year, we're projecting $82 million of revenues. Next year, more than $90 million. So again, given the growth of Washoe County and the appreciation of housing prices, those revenues have actually grown far higher and faster than any model we would have ever constructed would have projected. So that's nice. Again, we can use those monies for either paying debt service on rollover bonds that pledge those revenues, or there was a change in law 10 years ago or so that allows for pay-as-you-go financing using those monies as well. And then a somewhat minor revenue is government services tax. We get a small share of that for, again, capital projects in the school district. That had been flat over the several years because there weren't cars to buy. Now that's kind of rectified itself, so we're seeing that revenue come back to a kind of growth rate of 5% a year. So within your capital improvement program, and all of this is on that multi-page document ahead of the PowerPoint. There's all the details in there for you here, but we took a screenshot of that. And this shows you, again, the sources that we have available to pay for projects. As Adam mentioned, it's a very iterative process. So again, you see here projected sales tax revenues, and then we start modeling what we can afford to bond for and issue long-term debt for. And we have kind of forecasted this out over at least 10 years, actually. Legally, we have to present a 5-year CIP to you. There's no provision to show you a 10-year CIP, but we go out 10 years, in some cases 15 years to model this out. We've wrung out and squeezed out as much money as we can to create a sustainable long-term, i.e. 10-year plan. There's not a lot left over in terms of available revenues to finance projects. So we're trying to maximize our revenues to accomplish as aggressive of a CIP plan as we can to modernize our schools. But again, we can play around with when and how much we issue bonds, but we do try to stay within certain parameters for that debt service. We're never going to get too aggressive in issuing and then see revenues fall off and then have a problem. So you can see here, over the 5 years, we have projected $675 million of additional rollover bonds, and then $540 million of WC1 bonds. So more than $1 billion total of long-term debt. The good news is the school district had issued rollover bonds roughly 20 to 30 years ago, and a lot of those bonds are now maturing and roll off, if you will. So we're basically replacing debt we'd issued 20 years ago that's termed out, right? Last maturity has now been paid off, and so we're replacing that with new rollover bonds. So it's not additive, if you will. It's largely just replacing what was on the books, paid off, and issuing new debt. So that's nice, and that gives us a greater wherewithal to issue debt. And then there's just a number of sundry other revenues here, very minor, but contribute to the overall net revenues we have to pay for projects. And this just gives you a pie chart of what those sources are. So WC1, slightly more than 55% of total projected revenues, rollover bonds 42%, and so forth. Again, just to reassure you, we're not getting over our skis too much. We make sure that we have adequate coverage to pay for debt service. We kind of have informal thresholds that we abide by. The rating agencies are very comfortable with how we've managed this debt, but we, again, believe in having strong coverage and have strong buffer, because we know sales taxes can be volatile over time. And so we always want to have that ability to pay our debt service. All of these bonds have the full faith and credit of the school district behind them. So if we defaulted, we'd have to come up with operating revenues to pay that debt service. So we're always good for payment of that debt service. We have significant reserves as well, close to a year's worth of debt service. So even if we had no revenues for close to a year, we could pay all of our debt service for that year. And so those are all attractive features that go into both major rating agencies giving us a AA rating. Not quite as high as the county, but we have the highest debt rating of any school district in Nevada. And so we're proud of that. That gives us a better position to issue debt, pay a lower interest rate than our peer districts, and we always want to maintain that AA rating if possible. So that gives you an overview of our revenue situation that, again, goes into the equation that's one side of the ledger, and then the other side of the ledger is the expenditures.
Okay. Can I interrupt you there? I think we've got maybe a couple of members with some questions. We'll start with Member Bybee.
Is this a sheet? I can't find this in our packet. Was this added? It's not in what we have in our hand here.
You know,
It's
I
an extra
apologize.
sheet that we haven't seen.
We reordered the deck for convenience. This was really a financial slide that was second to last in the
Okay.
PowerPoint. I apologize for not noting that.
Okay, I didn't dig far enough.
We were chatting today, and I just thought,
Okay.
let's move this slide up since it's talking about
Okay,
revenues.
perfect. So it's in here, it's just farther back.
Yeah, it's, I
Perfect, thank
think
you.
it's page 35. Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, okay, please continue.
Sorry about that. So diving into the meat of the plan, I'd really like to start at the 50,000 foot level and just summarize it kind of using these three major components. The facility modernization plan, as I mentioned earlier, is going to now and for the foreseeable future comprise the majority of the CIP, but also a significant ongoing capital renewal portion. And then again, other major projects as they may come up, including potentially new school projects in the future. A little bit more detail on those, the FMP, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about that. We won't reiterate it on this slide. The capital renewal program, very much the same as what we've seen in years past. Roofs, windows, flooring, paint, etc. That's necessary, HVAC equipment, pavement. Currently budgeted at $50 million annually and critical to ensure that the assets we do have are maintained in good condition. In this year's version of the 5-year CIP, you'll see some ongoing and legacy projects such as Debbie Smith's Central Transportation, as well as other major projects such as a central admin facility. And then as I mentioned, monitoring enrollment growth trends. Currently the 5-year horizon doesn't project for new school needs, and so you won't see that budgeted in this 5-year CIP, but this comes back annually and as any plan will be updated accordingly. That's just the components. This is kind of what the details roll up into in terms of a pie chart. You can see, as I said, the majority of the expenditures within this 5-year CIP are associated with facility modernization projects. We'll get into more detail on many of those here in a bit. Capital renewal plan, approximately 16% of that pie chart, $50 million a year, critical. It doesn't sound like as much money, but that is distributed, as you guys know, over 100 projects across every existing school and facility in the district. Admin building, the new admin building, we're going to talk about that later tonight as well, composing a significant slice of the other major projects. And then as a part of the expenditures, basically modeled in the CIP, debt service, of course, as well. So the data behind that pie chart is rolled up a bit on slide 12 here. This is rolled out, if you will, in attachment A, so that should be in your packet as well. But that, the first line item, capital renewal, is, as I've mentioned a couple times now, a flat $50 million a year. As we have in the past years, we're going to come back in June ahead of fiscal year 25 and provide a detailed presentation and ask for your recommended approval for the itemized FY25 capital renewal plan. That's when we talk about, hey, replace the roof at North Valley's High School, replace the carpet at Lemelson Elementary School, things like that. But for the purpose of the CIP, we're still up here at a $50 million a year budget. The facility modernization plan projects is rolled up on this slide, so you can just see the level of investment. That varies from year to year as those projects kind of ebb and flow through their life cycles. Again, refer you to the attachment for the detailed line items, and I'll get into that in a couple more slides. You can see some of those additional elements of the CIP to a lesser degree rolled up and lined out here, as well as the debt service at the bottom. So continuing to dive a little bit deeper into the details here, I'm going to start, bless you, with the FMP. So this is a graphic that should at least look familiar to you. Don't squint too hard at it. This is the entirety of the FMP that includes proposed schools by name, projects, their scope, their budget, and the schedule as developed with our community and approved by our board and this committee in just December 2023. So scarcely 4 months ago. The takeaway that I really want to emphasize on this slide, and will continue to emphasize, is that this
capital improvement plan was composed to reflect precisely the recommendations associated with this plan. We feel very strongly that so much work went into developing that FMP that it is now our mandate to deliver in the form of this CIP. So you're going to see us tonight and hear repeatedly as we continue to come back to you, hey, we're gonna point back to this 2023 facility modernization plan because this is what we decided as a community to do and what the board's directed us to do. And here we are today doing it. 2 years from now, 5 years from now, similar to how we behaved following the WC1 initiative in 2016. Every time we came back, 2018, 2020, even as recently as just a few months ago, pointing back to that list of projects and demonstrating that we're executing as mandated. And of course, if circumstances change, we'll highlight that as well. But at this time, tonight, this CIP reflects the modernization plan approved just 4 months ago. So this red dashed box is where I'm about to zoom into. All right, this is the next 5 years. These are the projects on the horizon. This one, maybe you can squint at, maybe you can read it in your packets. But this is the next 5 years, starting at the top from that FMP. So you've got those legacy projects. We're going to look at those in detail as well. You can see on this slide that the costs estimated here are total project costs in 2023 dollars. When you see it in the CIP, we've now taken those dollars and distributed them over the life cycle of the project, and we've escalated them into the future by 5% annually. That was the assumption that we placed on these base budgets into the future with putting 5% on those numbers. So if you add them up and they don't look the same as those numbers, that's why. It was very intentional. So we're gonna go through all these projects, but as much as anything, the point on this slide, again, is that these projects should be reflected in the CIP with line items as well. So on this next slide is the continuance of the first 5-year horizon. You know, I went ahead and clipped everything all the way out to the end of those tails. Not all of them end by 2029, but these are all the projects that are intended to begin and are included within this 5-year horizon. Many of these projects are already in progress. As you recall, in December, or rather in February, we asked this committee for authorization to begin the design phase of a number of these projects. I think it's also important to note that, you know, this document, this FMP, provided a 1-year level of detail, right? Like that bar begins in 2024 for Reed and ends in 2027, for example, not specific on the month. So some of those projects are underway, some of them are not, but our intention is still to begin them within the calendar year that are specified in the FMP, or we'll communicate different otherwise. Okay, so taking from this overview and diving into some of the more specific projects on the next slide, we went ahead and summarized all of these projects onto one slide because this is the content that we saw back in February. These are the list of projects that we requested funding authorization to begin some stage of design phase work on, and I believe all but 2 of them have actually been initiated even since then. Small POs for due diligence studies on some of them, and of course the Vaughn project already well underway and in fact likely to break ground this summer. So all of these are underway. I'm not going to spend as much time talking about these, but they are all programmed into the CIP and in accordance with the budgeted projects, in accordance with the FMP and the associated escalation. A couple of the projects that are also in the FMP that are imminent, beginning in FY25, that we haven't spent as much time talking about together. Again, there's no allocation of dollars here tonight. To begin these projects, we'll have to come back to you separately and describe in more detail our intentions and ask for approval for funding. But our intentions are to move forward in FY25 with a modernization of North Valleys High School. In the FMP, that was included in the category, I believe, referred to as managed growth, right? This today is our largest high school by enrollment in the district. They have a number of portables, and they have some facility inequities relative to our most current high school. And so this will be the basic scope of North Valley's to expand the capacity of North Valley's High School to address the current and forecasted growth to a moderate degree, to eliminate the use of portables on that campus, and to modernize the existing facility in a variety of ways.
Got a quick question here again. Go ahead.
So Adam, I did have a question on this. North Valley's High School, relative to a lot of our schools, is not that old. I worked on that bond issue that built North Valley's in Spanish Springs, so it's probably longer ago than I remember, but as far as, obviously, not any high school is going to be the new Hug High School except the new Hug High School. So if we're comparing it to Hug High School, obviously not one high school in the area is going to compare because that is brand new, and I know we're striving to improve as we continue. That's the point of the whole program. But I was surprised to see, and I didn't realize, and I guess maybe you partially answered it, that the enrollment and capacity is the problem. But for modernization, I'm just curious how North Valley's High School needs modernization when I'm looking at schools that are so much older, you know, that are on your list but later, like Sparks High School obviously is, you know, the oldest, Reno and Sparks, but other high schools that are older, why modernization is a priority as we look at this plan and what we want to be spending our money on.
I appreciate the question, Councilwoman Bybee. So North Valley's High School had previously been anticipated to be relieved by the construction of a new additional high school up in Cold Springs, you may recall. With the cooling of the residential market and birth rate trends and enrollment trends, the data indicates strongly that that high school will not be needed in the foreseeable future. And so through extensive debate and engagement with the community up there, the solution or the preferred option of enhancing or expanding the capacity of North Valley's High School was what was ultimately recommended in the FMP. And so that's kind of why I highlighted, I'm back here a couple of slides. It's up there in that green, bright green, we're at category North Valley's High School. That is, to answer your point more directly, the reason North Valley's High School is being modernized as soon as it is relative to its age is because of its existing capacity needs and immediate forecasted growth needs. Now, the scope of that, in addition to a little bit of capacity addition, will be evaluated relative to our most current high schools. So also a great point, you know, we're not striving to make this school look like Hug High School exactly. We're not going to try to make Bernice Matthews look exactly like John Bohatch Elementary School, but taking the spaces and the concepts within our most modern school and trying to upgrade North Valley's High School in many of those ways, that's going to be the exercise. And so we'll be initiating that in FY25.
Okay, and what is the enrollment right now? I guess what was it built for? What is our enrollment right now? What are you projecting since we're not looking at a Cold Springs High School? What are your estimates? I know that's a crystal ball to really know exactly, but kind of where are we on enrollment? Are they at over 100%? I don't even know what the numbers are at North Valley's.
I can get close. I don't have it memorized, but they're very near 100% capacity. They're rated for approximately 2,400 students, and today they have, I believe, in that range, 2,300 students, something in that range. There is still growth in the North Valleys projected. That's not surprising, similar to Spanish Springs, our fastest growing areas in our communities. However, the student population, especially with some of the developments that have been put on ice indefinitely, the projections are not as aggressive of growth as we'd anticipated previously. So You know, within the 10-year horizon, could they get to 2,500, 2,600 students, something like that? Perhaps. I think that's what the projection suggests. But that's nowhere near enough to account for an additional high school. And so that's really the problem that we wrestled with throughout the FMP. We looked at a couple of different solutions. If you recall, moving 9th graders up into Cold Springs Middle School, perhaps. And this is really where we landed. So we're not there yet in terms of even scoping this out, but we're programming in the initial design funding in FY25.
Member Dis. Mr. Searcy, you mentioned mobile, and I think every time you say it, it triggers me. You said we're not quite at 100% in North Valley, so how come kids are in mobiles if we're not at 100%?
It's a great question. Stumbled right into that. You know, we like to find a sweet spot at about 85% of our maximum capacity, really for breathing room. Not every classroom is used every period of every day. And so operationally, whether it's because we just need a little bit of extra breathing room, if we're at 2,400 students in a school rated for that, oftentimes additional spaces are needed for those purposes and for special programs. Oftentimes special education or other special programs that maybe require a more isolated space or just a little bit of extra space are more appropriately accommodated in portables. I feel like that's a crummy answer, and trust me that this is something that chafes me to no end, but we're going to be getting rid of those portables just as soon as we execute this project.
Please proceed.
All right, so this one, moving back more to a logical needs-based prioritization relative to modernization, is Sparks High School. In the FMP, Sparks High School modernization was scheduled to begin in 2024 as well. And you'll see a longer schedule bar associated with Sparks High School. And that's, you know, we're pretty committed to starting. How exactly and when exactly it finishes, you know, I think is going to be more difficult to pinpoint. So this one's scheduled for 2024 to 2029. I think we can all have an appreciation for the level of sensitivity and complexity that it will take to devise the most cost-effective design and construction plan to take the historic Sparks High School and modernize it as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can. But we're going to start that endeavor in FY25 as dictated by the FMP, and the dollars for that are programmed into this CIP. Same logic, trying to come up with ways to enhance or improve the facility equity of this facility relative to our most modern high schools. Okay, so one more example of these. We've talked and approved initial funding previously for Matthews is a pinwheel. We talked about that style of building. We've approved funding for Palmer. We call that a pod sometimes up in Sun Valley, that style of building. This one, Maxwell, was identified as the first one to come out of the chute with this design style. You can see that aerial view in the lower right-hand corner. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the school of this make and model. And we're looking forward to proceeding with design phase in 2024 and executing the modernization of this to be replicated hopefully across the 20 or so similar sheepshed elementary schools we have in the district. Again, this one has a long schedule associated with it. 2024 to 2028 is what's depicted in the FMP, and that was to acknowledge the uncertainty that we have with how exactly we're going to design and construct a modernization here, and also the likely multi-phased construction that will be required here. This is likely going to be an active campus that will need to be done in multiple phases as opposed to sort of a greenfield empty construction site where we can just really rock and roll. So we're gonna take our time, figure it out carefully in partnership with that school, and then we're gonna execute it delicately and plan for it to be the model to modernize these types of schools, these designs of schools going forward. So really wanted to highlight these 3 examples of key components in FY25, in addition to the many that we've already taken first steps on that are part of this CIP that stem directly from that FMP.
Sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
Adam, with each of these in the FMP, as you go through that, you're also looking at your ficus, correct? And looking at what typically would have been a capital renewal. So with that modernization, it's just not the classroom. That budget, you don't have as much in capital renewal, but you're gonna be able to take care of those issues that you had in ficus, right? That would have been in the capital renewal program as you go through this. So it's not just the classroom, it's also the building and those components that were on the hit list, right?
It is, and that's a good segue, I think, to our capital renewal program. Member Cobb mentions FICUS. That's an acronym for Facility Condition Index System. It's really our asset management database where we look at the age and condition of our HVAC system, for example, at Matthews. So if we're going to go into Matthews or Maxwell and modernize it, here's our base scope that's prioritized on the basis of facility equity and efficiency, but perhaps there might be additional scope that is supported by that asset inventory, that FICUS program, that hey, if we're undergoing a construction project, a major construction project, and we also have an HVAC system that's beyond its useful life, would that be the most efficient opportunity for us to incorporate that into those projects? Those are absolutely conversations. And also, I should mention, we're looking ahead kind of in the opposite direction. So if I have an HVAC issue that is rising to the top in the FICUS system and the capital renewal program prioritization process that is associated with one of the schools that we're planning to modernize in the next couple of years, we are flagging that and taking a long, hard look at, hey, before I go in and dump a $500,000 HVAC project into Maxwell, only to come back 18 months later and disrupt it with an FMP project or something like that, should we bundle it up together, and what will it take for me to keep that HVAC system running in the meantime? As we go, we're trying to set up defendable processes, right? So this isn't just, there's checklists and there's like defendable logic and documentation behind why we are going forward with this capital renewal project, even though we're gonna come in 4 years from now. Well, it's a safety issue. It's, things of that nature that we can't wait on. But when possible, we're going to try to bundle these impacts, not only for the case of cost effectiveness, but impact and disruption to the campus. So long answer associated with our capital renewal program. Again, really, this is moving on to the other tier of our CIP, the capital renewal program that you guys have seen annually. This is, a typical breakdown of the distribution of our capital renewal program. Basically, we prioritize that $50 million based on keeping our schools and our students and staff safe, warm, dry, and connected. And we do that through data-driven analysis within this FICUS system, our asset management system, prioritizing the systems in the worst condition, whether it likely be by age or functionality, prioritizing them first. And again, the details behind this $50 million distribution for FY25 will come back to this committee in June. As a part of that, this is a little bit redundant to kind of what I just said. Again, FICUS system. As a part of that capital renewal program, we also allocate dollars towards refresh or replacement of aged out other critical school district assets such as school buses, IT infrastructure, and some other safety related equipment. Again, the details will come to you for approval and discussion in June. So the third tier of our CIP is other major projects. I've mentioned that we've talked at length about Debbie Smith CTE. Hopefully every time you drive by there, you're astonished with the progress. Get excited for summer 2024. We're really going to start turning some heads. That project, I'm proud to say, is going very successfully in partnership with our Q&D construction out there. And we're really excited for that fall 2025 school opening, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that as we get closer. Also very excited and pleased about the progress on the Central Transportation Yard expansion. Bids are due this Friday, so fingers crossed. I feel pretty optimistic about that one as well. But we've talked a lot about that, haven't talked that much about the central administrative facilities. That was a part of our CIP last year, and as some of you probably recall, we went back and forth with the board on. This CIP holds the construction, the design funding and the construction funding in the same fiscal years that we landed last year. Basically, the board asked the committee to accelerate that project by one fiscal year. The committee declined to concur with that, so the board agreed with the committee ultimately. Design in FY26, construction in FY27, which is what you'll see in this year's CIP. What has changed in this year's CIP is a proposed allocation or programming of $2 million in FY25 for the purposes of scoping, master planning, and programming. We talked last year about the possibility of building a new complex here on this property. We've talked in the past, formally and informally, about acquiring some other facility elsewhere in town and perhaps remodeling it. We've also talked quite a bit over the last 18 months through the facility modernization plan about the prospects and probability of the closure of existing school district schools and facilities and their potential reuse or repurposing, whether it be for a senior center, a before and after school program, Boys and Girls Club partnership, or an administrative facility for the Washoe County School District. All of those questions are extremely valid, but need to be answered before we can hire an architect and really start executing on a plan. And so what we're proposing, and again, we'll have to come back before this committee and actually formally request allocation of those dollars, but what we're programming in the CIP is that a formal study, a strategic study, needs to be conducted almost like a mini facility modernization plan. Hey, we've got a variety of departments and functions that need to serve the entire district. Is it ideal that they are all co-located? Who wants to be in what building next to whom, et cetera, for the efficiency of the operation of the central office? These questions need to be answered. So the goal is that in FY25 we're able to hire a partner, engage with all the relevant stakeholders, and lay out a plan that will inform the design that can begin in FY26. So that's really what that looks like. And that's the third. Oh.
Yeah, Adam, I have a question. I appreciate you're doing this. I think it's a fantastic idea because there are so many variables as to what's the best solution. And I appreciate spending the time and energy and money to do it because hopefully we're going to find the best place for everyone to be located, whether they're all together, different locations, but going to the schools and potentially using those properties, I love that as well. But if we haven't even decided as a district which schools maybe will be consolidated, how in the world could you even look at it from that point of view?
That's a fair question. I will highlight that in the facility modernization plan, a number of schools, I want to say upwards of a dozen, were specifically named for repurposing or closure. And so there's higher degrees of certainty with some of them versus others that will become more clear in years to come. But I think one example that I'm comfortable speaking about out loud because it's been addressed by name on many occasions and on the record is Smith Ridge Elementary School. is likely to be repurposed on or about 2029, somewhere in that area. And so, you know, there's absolutely a multitude of processes, formal, required public processes that will need to be engaged upon with the community, with the Board of Trustees before that could occur. So not to be presumptuous, but it has been spoken about formally and recommended in the FMP. That's a very centrally located, readily accessible facility that might serve a central office well for the Washington County School District, just as by way of example. So I think that's one way of answering the question, and also recognizing that this is still a scoping study, you know, and if they say, hey, for now you might have to lease space for a few more years into the future until this school is repurposed and comes available, any scoping study is going to have a degree of, you know, uncertainty or flexibility built into it. But we need to start to narrow the scope down. You know, are we completely moving off of this property and moving somewhere else, or are we reinvesting on this property, and if so, to what degree? We feel we need to create a more formal process to make those decisions, because they are involving a lot of different people and are pretty high stakes.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so thank you for letting me go through that in detail, everybody. That's really it. I think this last slide speaks for itself. We're very excited to begin aggressively implementing that facility modernization plan. We're extremely grateful that we have the financial resources and the support of the community to do that. So this is a recommendation to the committee to recommend this CIP to the Board of Trustees for approval here tonight. Thank you.
Got a question here with Member Bybee.
Thank you, Adam. I do have a question on, as we're looking at facility modernization and all of our CIP projects, it's come to my attention, at least out in the city of Sparks, but I know the whole community, it's an issue for outside the schools. I've never, in all the years I've sat on this committee, we've talked about classrooms, we've talked about portables, but we've never talked about the actual grounds, for athletics, for activities, playgrounds at the bigger schools, fields, and utilization of those fields, which many schools utilize, and the school district can and does rent them to soccer, to softball, to other community activities, as well as PE and clubs and activities. So I don't know, and when people ask me, I couldn't answer that. On all of this money we're spending for modernization, what piece do those fields come into play? Because we want to make sure, at least I do, for PE and utilization of the students at those schools, it's critically important, but then for utilization of the community as well. Where does that funding, is it totally separate outside of this? And I just don't ever remember addressing outside of the school. We're looking at inside, but what happens on the outside grounds, and where does money come that we can upgrade and do the modernization of the fields in many cases, and that's a safety perspective also.
So a couple aspects to that. You know, I think you know, this committee sometimes works at a higher level of detail. In our capital renewal plan, we absolutely prioritize buildings and grounds repair and maintenance. So, you know, things like the replacement of the Sparks High School track recently was funded through the capital renewal plan and executed. Things like that across the district, but they're largely replacements like in kind, right? Tennis courts need to be resurfaced, things of that nature. When we think about the facility modernization plan, we think in terms of facility equity. So we look at our, you know, North Valley, Spanish Springs, Damani Ranch, Proctor Hug that have a varsity and a JV practice, baseball, softball, football fields, and 6 tennis courts, and, you know, 6 outdoor basketball hoops, things of that nature. That's our standard. That's in our educational specifications. So we're gonna be looking at Reed High School, and we're gonna be looking at Sparks High School for examples, and looking at the deficiency. Sparks High School doesn't have 6 tennis courts. They don't have a varsity and a JV baseball, football practice field, nor does Reed. And we're also going to be looking at it from a context-sensitive standpoint. You know, there are non-school district organizations that, non-school district teams that use these facilities, and that's wonderful. Some more than others, right? Speaking specifically to Reed, is an extremely high traffic or high utilization, important asset to that community. So that's going to be an important part of the facility, the modernization scope on that campus. And the solution might be different at Reed than it is at Sparks for different reasons. We're probably never going to get 6 tennis courts on Sparks High School campus for different reasons. Maybe they don't need it as badly, or maybe it's just deeply, constrained from a real estate standpoint. We'll work through all those details, but the lens is how can we bring them up to a level of parity to the greatest degree possible, and doing so really in the most cost-effective manner. Where should we be investing those dollars? Is it really important that we spend $150,000 to create that team room like Hug has inside the campus, or would that money better be spent in a different way on that school? It's going to be tricky, but we're going to be working through those on a project-by-project basis and in partnership with that school community.
I just have a follow-up. Do we run into any of them where, I guess, where we do just a modernization of the fields, or do they typically get bundled in with the modernization of the school itself? If that makes sense.
Well, I mean, previously we haven't had facility modernization projects, so historically we're managing our grounds assets, whether it's the snack shack, or the bleachers on the baseball field, or the baseball scoreboard, or the track. The same way we're managing our roofs and our HVAC systems and our carpets on a asset management, condition, worst first basis, and also prioritizing the magnitude of those investments coldly relative to their impact to the classroom. Right, so if I have to choose between the HVAC system or a safety and security issue that's inside the classroom versus, how bad's the condition of the warning track on the baseball field, that's how we try to allocate those resources. But regardless, we maintain all of the district assets outside of the school building or on our property, and try to program that into our capital renewal program. Now, going forward, every one of these FMP projects, we're also going to be looking, as I said, to the whole campus relative to our most modern schools. So I think, particularly at those high schools, you're gonna see some of these evaluations and some more significant improvements to the grounds and athletic facilities as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Seeing none, looking for a motion.
I'll move to recommend approval of the proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2025 through 2020.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Perfect. Let's move on to item 2.03. Discussion and possible action to forward to the Board of Trustees for their consideration and approval the Washoe County School District's Capital Improvement Program agreed upon audit procedures report by BDO Audit Services. This is also for possible action.
All right. Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee, Kirk Starkey, Chief Auditor for the record. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me tonight. This is an item for possible action, so please, at any time, don't hesitate to ask any questions. It's not a problem. But I'll start with a little background on this item. Basically, a while back, this committee requested an audit of the policies, procedures, and process activities the district uses to manage construction professional service providers, such as architects, engineers, and design firms. Initially, we worked with a couple members of this committee to scope out the project. Later, I presented the proposed procedures to the audit committee, who approved, and later the board did as well by agreeing to authorize the monies for a third party to perform this work. The project is basically an agreed upon procedures review designed to provide independent assurance, so it's outside of our office, of the design and operating effectiveness of the district's financial and administrative controls around engaging, managing, and monitoring professional service providers contracted to support on the capital improvement projects. We prepared an RFQ, which is request for quotes, and received competitive proposals from 4 firms. BDO was ultimately selected and completed the work. A copy of the final report is part of your packet tonight. BDO concluded that the district's policies and processes in this area are adequately designed and operating effectively, and identified only 2 recommendations for improvement. The first recommendation, it's located on pages 9 and 10 of the report. It's centered on the discrepancy between the language in Admin Reg 3323, which is professional services for the district, and the actual practices by the purchasing department. Here it was found the regulation was written for professional service consultants engaged for activities other than construction projects, and thus the expectations for informal RFPs for services between $25,000 and $99,000 did not apply to the project consultants. The purchasing department will work to clarify this wording within this regulation that it applies to. The second recommendation noted in the report, it's on page 14. Here's where BDO found during their document testing work that one consultant amendment form did not have the deputy or chief facility management officer's signature on the form as is required. To improve the controls in this area, the facilities management officer plans to improve training and implement a quarterly spot check on those forms. Please note, though, that approximately 6 months from now, maybe 9 months from now, just somewhere in that range, our office will follow up with the department to determine whether the recommendations have been appropriately corrected as mentioned in the report. But in the big picture, overall, in my opinion, the results from this report positively reflect the district's efforts in managing the capital improvement projects in this area. Finally, I want to thank the management and staff of Capital Projects Purchasing, the business office, along with the BDO team. They did, all of them, for cooperating to get this project done. Much appreciated. It was well done. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. But just as a heads up, if you have any questions specifically for the BDO team, I'm happy to take them. It's not a problem. And I'll reach out to them and get you the responses back. I just didn't have them appear tonight due to the nature of the findings and the limited number of them. It was a way to kind of save a couple bucks on the contract, so I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Just as far as the professional services, really, NRS allows great latitude. There is no monetary value. So really, that's more of a school district in a separation of what is outside of construction. Because NRS is real specific that allows a selection of a design consultant for construction without a monetary value to it.
Kirk striking for the record, you're correct. And so the district, in a way of saying, goes kind of above and beyond would be the best way I can say it.
Okay.
And sending these out for proposals and selecting from that group.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
Any other questions on this? I'm gonna probably maybe have just a couple.
Fire away.
So, and maybe these aren't for you, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But on these samples, I'm just wondering, on these samples, it's hard for somebody outside of the district to maybe know what these companies provide.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? But like I couldn't tell you, let's say for example, the construction management company, right? Which one of these is the construction management company?
Off of what's in the report, which is basically in Appendix A, I don't know. And to be honest with you, that's kind of, in outsourcing this type of work, that's kind of sometimes what you run into. I can reach out, it shouldn't be a big deal. I can contact BDO and get you an itemized list for each one of these samples that they selected and what exactly they do. Not a
Okay.
problem. That's no problem.
I don't know if it's maybe perhaps maybe I can put an email together with just several of my questions that I might have. It might be the easiest way to go through it, but
That's fine.
you know, one of the things is like when I look at the I'm not sure how they worded it here, but part of the explanation of it is, you know, we see policy 3320 procurement. Is there a link to that?
In this, I can get you that too. Is there a link in this? No, but it's the district website has all these.
All of them are on
They're
district
all on
road.
it, yeah.
So I think what would probably be better then is before I just start to throw a bunch of questions out that aren't gonna get answered anyway. What I'll try to do is maybe I can get with Adam or somebody with staff and maybe go through the policy procedures, because I think that would probably help somebody like in my position to just be a little more comfortable, because basically at the end of the day, what we're looking at with this is we go, okay, we asked for all this, and then we just blind trust that everything we asked for got looked at, but I don't know that there's, you know, I mean, when I struggle to even know what you know, I have the names of the companies that got it, but I don't know these companies. I'm not sure what they cover, what, you know. So anyway, I think that'll probably be best, is I'll just follow up with an email.
No problem, but just kind of a little context, when the auditors are doing this work, when BDO's doing it, without speaking exactly for them, but I'm taking pretty much a guess on it, but they're going to scope it out with, well, I know they did because we talked through on the processes, on the procedures that are in the report, the different activities that they were to perform. They're working with the departments, our office as well, identifying all the policies, the procedures, anything that goes into these projects, and we basically give them everything and say these are the big ones that we typically work with that would identify, and then they go through and handle it that way for this type of project, if that provides any assurance. But basically that's how it's.
I honestly, I feel like perhaps if I can get on the website, I can get into these policies and read the policies a little better. I have a little better understanding of maybe what this means. I get the fact
Fair
that
enough.
you know, you didn't want to inundate us with a 700-page report.
Yes, sir.
That everyone's just going to kind of glass over. I understand that. So that's all I have.
All good.
Do we need a motion to approve this audit and send it to the board, to the trustees, or I guess maybe, can I ask this question? Can we maybe table the approval of this until the next meeting when maybe we have some more time to do a deep dive? I'd hate to approve it, send it to them, get into a deep dive, and then be like, wait, I wish I hadn't approved that. That makes sense? Is everyone okay with that, perhaps? So maybe just table this for now, is that okay, Adam?
This is certainly the discretion of the committee, but, you know, I want you guys to feel comfortable with any recommendations. So if there's follow-up questions, and we're, you know, happy to provide additional information either via email to the entire committee or bring it back at our next meeting. You know, there's not a particular time sensitivity here.
Perfect, thank you. Any other discussion on this one? Seeing none, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Where are we at, 3.01, public comment?
There's no public comment.
Perfect, I believe the next meeting is set for June 6th. And if nobody's got anything else, we are adjourned.
Yeah, swing that gavel.